And thank you for joining us. This is the Manifesto Tracker, first edition of this in this election season. And we do Manifesto Tracker with an expert. And today I'm delighted that I've been joined in the studio. My co-presenter today, you see me asking him questions, but today he's the man doing the presentation with me, Dr. Kojo Asante with the Center for Democratic Development. And we're going to do governance. Obviously, the CDD is the preeminent institution in this country when it comes to the CSO space on a subject of governance. And by the way, we took inspiration from a manifesto document that they actually released. And we said we're going to use that as a benchmark to measure what the parties have said in their manifestos when it comes to this particular area. So I'm happy that he joins me in the studio. And thank you, Doc, for joining us on PM Express.
Thank you, Evans. Yes. Feeling very uncomfortable, having to do your work today.
Exactly,
but, happy to be here.
But your bottom line, he's the man who understands presentation. So I'm going to sit back and ask him the questions, and then he will do the presentation. Let's get into it, yes, because there's a lot to sort of look at. And why are we doing this? We want to leave you informed. And so the manifestos are pretty bulky. If you don't break it down, it's just a document that you don't look at, but they become a governing piece of document. At least the MPP told us that if you don't look closely at the free SHS, when they came into power, they wanted to implement it the way they captured it in their manifesto. CDD had said, and everybody said, can you now apply the learnings from the implementation and reform? They said, no way. We said it's going to be free for everybody, boarding house. And so that's exactly what we're going to do. And that is why a conversation like this is important. Catch it now so you can inform yourself in making a decision before you realize later that the black and white you didn't pay attention to. So this is what you said, CDD. Yeah. We just clustered it because there are some specifics. The first area was local governance and democracy, which for you was important.
Sure. And I think the key thing is that everybody knows that our local government system actually started before our return to democracy in 1988. And for all those years, it's almost come to a point where we need serious reform because everybody agrees that it's not working. Yeah. And we've been talking about electing mayors. Of course, that is not the only thing. People think that there should be more money going to local areas. There should be more capacity at the local areas. But we've been talking about it for government promise that, we would elect mayors. And the last time in 2019 when the matter was, we thought we were going to have the opportunity to make the decision, it was taken away from us. Yeah. So we are going into another election. There are promises that are being made. Do we finally get an opportunity to elect our mayors? Yeah. And so that we can have some accountability at the local government level.
That's one of the key things that you propose the party should look at. And then anti-corruption was important for you, and public sector integrity. That's right. There's some very important things you propose the parties must include in your manifesto for it to be responsive. One of the key things you wanted was look at the Conduct of Public Officers Bill.
Yes. This has been in the corridors of power for over 10 years. It's been to Parliament. The President had promised it. The Attorney General had promised it. Just recently, the President reiterated his commitment to passing this bill. Even in the IMF commitment, it's also there. So basically, we've been waiting for it because what it does is that it regulates ethics, public ethics, asset declaration, conflict of interest, gift giving, all of those things. That will regulate some of the things that, it's not written in the law, and therefore that kind of behavior. We think that if we are able to pass it, it would really enhance our anti-corruption fight.
One of the areas that struck me was the public sector integrity bit, where you look like SIGA. Yeah. But also the thing that I liked about the suggestions you made for parties to consider is the merit-based appointments to the SOEs.
Very much so. The fact that we've developed this practice now where MPs sit on public boards. And all these public boards that have to go to Parliament and get them scrutinized and so on, when you have the same MPs that are supposed to scrutinize these boards sitting on the boards, that's a conflict of interest situation. But apart from that, a lot of the SOEs are being run by, former chairmen of parties, former whatever, every party guru when you go to their Congress, it's like the who is of the party.
Yeah.
That already creates a very difficult problem for these SOEs to actually, be run efficiently. And that's why we are having problems with the SOEs.
And what you're saying is so important. Just look at where we are as an economy.
Yeah.
And you're leaking billions and billions of cedis.
And the IMF shows that one of the damages to our economy is just the debt that SOEs are creating for us. And if you flip it, they could actually be a real income earner if they are being run well. And I think that's where we're also looking at.
And that's an important point. And then we come to the campaign finance and electoral reforms. Let me disclose. I'm part of the committee that CDD set up to try and consult broadly on reforming and making proposals around what we can do with the current campaign financing legislation. And I'm not surprised that it was one of the things that you wanted the parties to champion in your manifestos.
Evans, this is foundational. We have monetized our elections and our democracy. And we have to find a way to regulate campaign financing because that is where corruption begins. When people mortgage their houses, they go and borrow money, even you have people who are doing illegal stuff that gets into the parties and they use it to do their campaigns. When they get into government, they'll find ways to recoup it. And that's where the corruption starts. The problem you have is that if everybody is doing it, it becomes very difficult to enforce the laws against corruption. So you have to do something about campaign financing if you are going to sanitize government. And
this is so important. I just want to use one example to illustrate the point. We are fighting galamsey right now. And one of the things that CDD track is illicit financial flows into our electionary season. I can bet you that a lot of the illegal mining, illicit funds coming out will be going to political parties in this election.
And what was one of the main reasons why people were saying that they couldn't solve this problem now? Because they will lose votes.
Exactly.
So who is the one that they are protecting?
And this is so, you're right, it's just foundational. It's at the heart of if you don't fix this problem. And the two things you propose there, place a cap on donations.
That's right.
But also limit the period, I believe. But also bring some transparency into it.
And it's even much more comprehensive than that because the other thing you have to do is you have to regulate internal competition. Because the money that
starts from there,
yes, the money that's flowing through the parties don't go through the parties, they go to candidates. So the whole value chain of presenting candidates have to be looked at. Because if you don't do that, then you will not be able to solve the problem. So you cannot leave the parties to just have their own constitutions. And because they are competing, you cannot, if somebody is doing something else, then the other person will think, why, if he's not obeying, then I wouldn't follow suit. So you need a standard system for regulating how monies are deployed within parties, with candidates, and so on and so forth.
And so we'll see, and what the reason we are doing is we'll go to the rest very quickly. You'll see which political party is addressing these key points. So remember, this is the benchmark. So if you're not addressing as many of this as possible, CD is telling you that your manifesto is lacking. Is lacking in key areas. So, and the state-owned enterprise, we talked about that already. The key reform that you need to do. The public service reform too. Again, the politicization is something you want to take out of the public service immediately.
But see, I think everybody can attest to, you cannot run any economy, any serious society without an efficient public service. And once it's politicized, it's not able to deliver. And I think increasingly, the public servants themselves have come and said that this is too much. We are getting, we are not able to operate because, increasingly the politicians are interfering. So we have a serious challenge. And what we are saying is that we need to look at public service reform again. And it's such a huge...
We should have a whole ministry for this.
Well, it's not dead. It's still very active. Some of the work that we are currently being done around the passports, and that's what the public sector reform and Honorable Osafo Maafo is continuing to do. But it needs to be deeper than that. And I think CLOSAC in particular has been raising this issue. I remember when the president said that he was in a hurry and therefore needed to appoint all these ministers. What it did was even deepen the politicization, because you relied on the political part of the public service and not the technical part of the public service.
So this is absolutely important. And finally, the constitutional reform is a big one.
It's a big one.
We spent a lot of money doing this, and I'll show you how much money and all the work. And it has remained a paper tiger. Right. Somewhere gathering dust. There's a white paper. We'll see which party has a good track record on this subject, but we know this. I even don't want to spend too much time on it, but it's so fundamental in what you propose. We'll see which party says what on this. In all, there are 17 key points that CDD says it's important for parties to look at and to pay attention to. And if you sort of break it into the clusters, the main focus, just in the numerical terms, you see it in the local governance and democracy. Why not? I mean, because also, Kojo, in your own studies in the past with the Afrobarometer showing that the decline, people's trust and their assessment of the benefits of democracy is dropped by 23%. Yeah. Between 2011 and I believe till 2023.
Yes.
So that is a problem. Yeah. You know, and that's no wonder a lot of the proposals.
Yeah, because I think democracy, people feel democracy at the lowest level.
Exactly.
And the more you feel like it is so far away from you, you feel completely marginalized. Yeah. You know, if the president has to come and solve even water pollution in your area, then you have a fundamental problem with democracy.
You're right. And so the benefits there are important if you get it right. And that is why there's a lot of focus there. And then you come to the state-owned enterprise and reform. Why is this important? As we've been saying, our economy is leaking and bleeding, and they can actually help us out. And you can look at the share when it comes to the other key areas here. But the two parties, we want to do the first, the numerical, in terms of which party addressed most of the 17 items. MPP had 7 of them. In other words, MPP, I don't know whether they actually looked at the document, but whatever they did, they had 7 of the key points we just talked about in their manifesto that they promised they would do. NDC has 5. MPP has 7. NDC has 5. But numbers don't tell the story. You need to look at what they are saying that they will do. Right. So let's go to the specifics. Yeah. And let's start with a big one. Yeah. This was most controversial, I believe, before 2019 when the current president attempted. And I remember CDD and everybody was happy that this, after so many years of pushing, we are going to get all of us electing our MMDCs.
That's right.
But something happened. Yeah. The question of whether it should be partisan or non-partisan. Yeah. So the MPP is promising that they will reinitiate the process of getting MMDCs elected. Yeah. NDC is going a step further. They will do it, but they'll do it on a non-partisan basis. Yes. But what does the research says? Where do most of us Ghanaians stand? Should it be partisan or non-partisan?
Currently, it's still non-partisan.
Okay.
That's been, the Afrobarometer has been going to be released on Friday.
Okay.
So we'll see whether or not the sentiments remain the same. But Ghanaians continue to make the point that they want their mayors to be elected on non-partisan basis. The MPP has always maintained that they prefer it to be on partisan basis. I think the NDC in 2019 made the point that they sided with the sentiments that people were expressing. And I think now that has been sort of affirmed in their manifesto. And I think we've come to a point where that shouldn't impede us. If that's what we want, there shouldn't be any reason why we shouldn't go ahead, because we don't actually need a referendum to make that happen.
And this is critical. And the reason why we're doing Manifesto Tracker is now you know if this is why you're going to be voting. Yeah. The research says majority of Ghanaians want it on a non-partisan basis. So the question you need to ask is which party is actually speaking to the real needs and aspirations of Ghanaians? And it's on the evidence of it, NDC saying if that is the reason why you'll be voting, they are addressing that on a non-partisan basis. So you can come to the table and go into the booth informed about that. So let's take that out. So that's what the two parties say. And on the subject of the political party financing, which was, as you said, was foundational, MPP is silent. NDC tackles it. And they want to review the regulatory framework for political party financing. They didn't give us specifics.
There's no specifics. And that actually, I wanted to see specifics.
Yes.
Because the issues are quite comprehensive, Anybody that wants to address this problem really needs to look at. And the committee had everybody on.
Everybody, NDC,
MPP, everybody. So I was expecting that we had long enough to really look at this issue And everybody has been talking about it. I know President Mahama, I believe, had a lecture about it. So it's not new. That's why I'm a bit surprised that
they didn't drill down.
We weren't getting details, because we really do need specific. Because come after this election, that should be one of the number one issues that we have to address.
And this is the first part of the show. Second part, the spokesperson for the two parties on governance will be here. So the issues we are raising, I'm going to be putting it to them, right? And so the campaign lead for the NDC team for the running mate will be here. So I'm going to put that to him. Also, we have the spokesperson on governance and legal for the MPP team will also be here. We'll put that to him. Why is it that they have nothing on the subject that important? And why is the NDC not giving us specifics? And I need to say one thing on this. The parties tend to write these very, vague, broad things so that they can hide when they come to power. So when you go and hold them to it, they will say, oh, but, they can then choose and pick what they do here.
Well, I mean, I think we shouldn't restrict ourselves. If it's important to Ghanaians, whether you've written it or you haven't, we'll still have to demand it.
Exactly.
Because I think we are electing them to solve our problems.
Yeah.
So if they have listed problems that doesn't include ours, and it's a problem we need to solve, we need to still insist that it should be solved.
The MPP says something about MMDs, though, but they want to strengthen fiscal capacity of that. But which is...
Well, I think, so the issue, and as I said, beyond even the election of mayors, one of the things we have to ask ourselves, you see, currently you don't have the equivalent of a parliament, right, that with all the committees and so on and so forth, that would hold an elected mayor accountable. Because all the committees of parliament, by law, are actually committees of the executive by the assembly structure. So even that needs reform. So there are other consequential reforms that have to come with the MMDC election. And it's something that we have raised, that, there's a much deeper reform that has to go. Otherwise, you elect a mayor who really cannot be restrained. And you cannot do that.
Okay.
Yeah.
And also, we see that the MPP is also addressing the subject of the gift mix. Yes.
Well, so currently under the IMF program, where government made this commitment, this issue about tying the integration of the public procurement issue, public procurement, this is the electronic platform, right, with the gift mix, should have been completed by now. And it's being postponed. So I was actually surprised to see it in the commitment. Does that portend that we are not going to finish it and we'll continue to have that?
That's an interesting point.
Because this is very fundamental to tracking our income and expenditure.
Okay.
And has been one of the problems that we have identified as the weaknesses in our internal controls, because we are not tying registering our transactions on gift mix. And that allows for people to bypass the system, and the finance ministry cannot track those transactions. So I was quite struck to see this there. So maybe we should ask why we are still seeing this there.
So you expected that because they should.
It was actually supposed to have been done before even the first tranche
came in.
It came in.
And then now it's in a manifesto for 2025.
So yes.
Okay, so that's a good question we'll ask. And when we sit down, we'll ask that question. Another thing is that this does is also look at the party's track record on the subject. When they are telling you something, you need to look at when they had opportunity, what did they do with that opportunity?
And I would also want to hear from the NDC in terms of the commitments on the IMF.
Okay.
That's
a very important point.
What do they want to do about that? Because that, if they inherit that right now, what is the plan? Because I wanted to see what they are.
I've heard John Mahama say, but he hasn't drilled down to which areas, but they said they would renegotiate the terms with the IMF.
Well, I hope that
whether this is one of those.
I hope that
we don't know.
We'll renegotiate that one.
And then I see both of them talk about SIGA.
That's right.
And this addresses something that you also said in your benchmark governance manifesto. But the interesting thing for me is both of them are pretty vague as to what exactly they want to do with SIGA.
Yes. And you can see that one is probably addressing the outcome. So if we get the governance right, and we get the entities, the SOEs, working effectively, we should be able to create more jobs and have more revenue. But we need to address the governance, the corporate governance, challenges and all the problems that
I mean, this is where the job for the boys. I mean, all these party boys running around, you need to reward them somehow.
Yeah, but that is that's what we have to stop, because if we turn the SOEs into some sort of campaign financing, entities, then really it's going to actually even damage our economy even further.
Yeah.
And I think people are getting used to it, that, oh, this is the place that you go and sort of raise an election war chest. And that has to stop.
Yeah.
And that's why we were making proposals around the governance around it.
Yeah.
So it would be good to hear what...
And trust me, when I sit them, I'll ask them that question. Are both parties, when they put this in here, do they really want to see... what are the specifics around this?
Yes.
Are they going to limit, in fact, not even limit, scrap this thing where they have their parties, the political folks in there, it's not based on merit, and etc. We'll ask them that question. Review of the NDPC Act is key, which has been talked about for so long. MPP has it in there. Again, when they say review, what do they want to see instead of what we currently have? We don't know. And NDC is quiet on that. Yeah,
but I think NDC has some proposals around the composition of
the
NDPC, bringing other actors and stakeholders into it.
Play.
Are they going to review the act in order to accommodate that or not? I think
it's a key point there. And then just the last two points, both of them still benchmarking against the CDD point. Well, MPP wants, where required, undertake constitutional review and amendments. NDC says establish a constitutional review implementation committee. Let me say something about the NDC. The NDC is the party whose government set up the constitutional review commission that did the work. And then they produced a white paper. Mills obviously didn't see it through because, unfortunately, he passed. But then he handed the baton over to John Mahama. And then John Mahama in 2012, actually, it's a line item in the 2012 manifesto that they will implement the white paper. Got opportunity for 4 years, nothing happened. But the interesting thing is that after the 2016 elections, every elections after that, 2016, 2020, even now, as you see, there's always this line item there. I
think there was an implementation committee that was set up in the John Mahama period, but that couldn't get its committee to sort of move forward on the agenda. But the constitutional reform issue, I think, is fundamental. The question is, how do you move forward? I mean, and I think you need some mechanism to do that, whether it's through establishing another committee to sort of look at how you move forward. Do you present a new constitution altogether, because people are saying the clause by clause might not work? Or, as the president has done, you take one provision after the other to change.
Like the MMDC provision, for example.
So I think there is no easy process going forward. But whatever it is, I think we have to be very aggressive in bringing the matter front and center and see what the methodology should be.
The good thing is both parties are committed to do something about it, so that's good. And then finally, on the subject of the Code of Conduct for Public Office holders, is what you're saying.
That's right.
That NDC is committing to do it. You also have a version of this in the MPP1, which is the make every 2 years the asset declaration. The key question to ask, though, does this address the problem with the asset declaration?
Both of them don't address it for me, because the NDC talks about a consolidated code of conduct. They also talk about a conflict of interest view. They also talk about an asset declaration expansion and all of those things. Meanwhile, there is a code of conduct for public officers bill that has been outstanding for 10 years.
So you mean simply pass it?
And it's a comprehensive bill, as I told you earlier, has all those elements in it. So why are the parties running away from that bill?
That's a good question.
So why are they not committing to just pass it? And we have engaged extensively with both parties, And of course, we are talking MPP, NDC, but there are, of course, other independent candidates who are also vying and all of that. And I'm quite surprised that in this particular issue that the proposals I've seen, it's like
is that they don't know that the bill is there?
Of course they know. That's what I said. We've had extensive engagement on this bill. So I was surprised that even they were looking at it in pieces. Because it has gift giving, undue influence, all of the things that we we have experienced, cash for seats, all the things that will come and somebody will say, oh, a conflict of interest, but where is the law that says this is wrong? We want to prohibit people so that they don't even get into the face of actually committing the crime. Those conduct should be prohibited.
That's a very important point.
Because that will stop.
And it puts it in context why they sort of skirt around it.
As a declaration.
Yeah, and the interesting, the NDC said they want to develop a consolidated code of conduct. A fresh one.
I think the Kopo bill. I think the only thing.
And MPP completely avoids the subject.
You can look at it because once it's presented to Parliament gets an opportunity to review it.
This has been there for what, 10 years?
Oh, I think more than 10 years now. I've been involved with it for
and it's still not in the manifestos for the next.
And it's actually a condition, one of the conditions for the IMF program, which government of Ghana committed
to. So you would have expected that you see
at least
in the MPP manifesto.
At least the MPP would say, yeah, we'll pass it before whatever.
Yeah. Well, that's an interesting point. The question I'll put to my guests when they join me quickly. Let's quickly wrap this up. In terms of the top issues, we've talked about them already, that both parties are dealing with. This is for the key thing. Out of the 17, they addressed quite a number of them, the top issues. But then you also look at the constitutional review exercise that we saw, the work that was done, money was spent on it, exercise that, they travel around the country, talk to 50,000, people, submissions. But then on the track record bit, the NDC, as I said, worked on this. Yeah. They couldn't quite implement it, although they were in power for quite a bit, for 4 years. We need to find out why. But if you didn't implement what we had the opportunity, why should we trust that if you give you another 4 years, you can implement it this time? It's a fundamental question we'll ask them. The MPP, too, obviously, has been in power, but their approach is different. The president has said so. He hasn't hitting this wholesale reform of the constitution. He doesn't believe in it, so... But they have no implementation at all on this. And then the approach is what we've said already. Both sides want to do something about it, but approach it differently. But the big ticket items, as far as the manifesto constitution is concerned, this is NDC.
Yes.
And this is what I was saying.
Yes.
This is their manifesto since 2012. And we're isolating NDC because they birthed the Constitution Review Commission. 2012, they said they'll follow up on the implementation of the Constitution Review Committee. That's in their manifesto. 2016, they said they will implement government white paper on Constitution Review Committee. And this is after they had 4 years and they didn't implement. 2020, another line, follow up. You see, it's a repetition of what they said in 2020, same word for word. 2024 is back to establish Constitutional Review Implementation Committee. And I think you said earlier that there was some attempt to form a committee that didn't quite, produce. But that is the NDC's track record on the subject. And then when you come to the track record on selected governance ticket, on the key issues, election of MMDCs, MPP, we said it already.
That's right.
They started, stalled, died because of the whether or not you be partisan or not. Constitution Review, they have no record because they want to deal with it quite differently. Started in 2010, they hadn't done anything for NDC, and then passed the Conduct of Public Officers Bill. MPP introduced asset declaration. It completely dodges the question. The NDC says they want to do a whole consolidated approach to this. But, Kojo, this is another thing that interests me, was to do the numbers. And one of the things that civil society, and me and you have had this conversation a lot of time the time it's about how many promises you are making, and not the quality of the promises or the outcomes.
Very much so.
And so for us, this is important to just see, it's almost as if it is a competition around who can make the most promise.
I mean, I read, and I think you always have to look at where we are in terms of the governance challenges. And I think what we tried to do in highlighting what the key issues was like, okay, if we get these big items, and not just the big items, but what are we doing about them? If we tackle them, we can really make a dent in strengthening governance and corruption issues. And I think sometimes when you read, because when, for example, I look at corruption issues and somebody says, okay, I'll use digitalization and so on. We did work on anti-corruption. And at the DVLA, I realized that, people could circumvent the whole IT process and go and see people behind and not even take a test. And so it's not enough. What you have to do is, even when those things happen, how do you punish people So yeah, you deter that practice.
Yeah.
So how those things link together, I think is
important.
important.
I mean, you narrowed it down to the 17 big things to do.
Yeah.
But then you look at the parties, they are doing, what, 41, 33. And I'm asking myself, but how is it realistic to do 41 things on governance?
I think some of them, some of them, when I read it, some of them are connected, linked.
To
But even with that, you want to understand what is the outcome. So how would I judge?
Exactly.
How would
if
I
you've been
judge?
successful.
If you are successful.
Yeah.
For example, in sort of, making a cashless sort of system.
How do you measure that?
How do I measure that it has reduced corruption by 30%?
Yeah.
Then I know that, if I'm accessing public services in these sectors, this was the corruption benchmark. After you have done this, corruption is at this stage. And people can feel it.
Yes, absolutely.
So it's those kinds of metrics that...
that is so lax. And every election year, we have this conversation.
Exactly.
And you still see the manifestos come out, and it's not outcome-driven.
Yeah.
It is just input, just putting stuff in there.
We'll do this and we'll do that.
Yeah. So that's on a very important point that we wanted to isolate there. And as for the corruption subject, it's important. But this competition around size of government, and I see you didn't include it necessarily in yours, but because they themselves have seen that is an important
I think it's
thing
symbolic. It's symbolic, and and people would even want it to be lower.
Yeah.
But I think it's symbolic, and we need to take a step forward because, we want to see a more efficiency in government.
Yeah.
And I like that some of the parties are talking about not just ministers, but the whole machinery.
Yes. In fact, NDC says they want to
because
realign.
if you are having close to 1,000 people working, at the presidency or wherever it is, that is
Office of Government Machinery. I think I saw the NDC one says that they want to reduce the numbers.
So we really need to look at the efficiency. One of the tasks that we're trying to do was to actually cost the whole business of running government, so that we actually know, where we can actually reduce the cost of doing these things.
You're so right. And if we're doing outcomes-focused budget, the 60, they should be telling us what savings you expect to make here and what impact will they have on the economy, etc. But we don't know that yet because they're not focused on that. And then on the corruption subject, and I will end here because the corruption is such a big deal. Yeah. And we want to see if the parties really are tackling that enough, right? MPP is the things they say they'll do about corruption. Digitalization is at the heart of it. Obviously because of Bamia, who is obviously and that's what he's did anything strike you in terms of the things they say they'll do to end corruption?
For me, so when I think about digitalization, I see these things are just tools, right?
Yeah.
The most important thing is access to information.
Yeah.
So it's making information available, putting sunshine on the functions of government, on the running of government. Yeah. And so all of these things,
so they say, for example,
platform,
e-marketplace,
yes. knowing, so that there's competition. Yeah. But it's not that the competition is happening, that I can go on that platform and see that the competition is happening. So it's all about how we deepen access to information generally across the whole government system. And the emphasis should be on that. As for the tools, because technology is that disruptive, it keeps changing. Yeah. There are easy ways of accessing those things. So I think the emphasis should be on that for me. And the things like limiting, these are all symbolic. They sort of, the public scholarship. It's one of the easy ways in which we sort of signal how we share and allocate resources in an equitable way. Yeah. And it should be that anybody from any background should be able to, in a fair way, access. So if there's a platform where everybody knows who is getting it, their background, that they go through a transparent process, I think that enhances confidence in government. Kojo, thank you very much. And we're going to take a lot of the things that Kojo had said and put it to my guests who are now joining us in the second part of this conversation on Manifesto Tracker. They will answer a few of the things that we raised right after this. Alex Segbefia is my guest, and then it's been a long time since we heard of her, but she's now the lead governance and legal for the NPP when it comes to the issue. Gloria Furubedu is my guest also. The two of them will sit with me, and I will have them answer these questions as we've raised here
in our analysis. Stay with us. And thanks for staying with us on PM Express. This is Manifesto Tracker. It's on PM Express. It's brought to you by Syntex Tanks. It is strong, it is tough. Academic Times and the 2024 Green Film Festival, which starts this very Friday. My guest in the studio with me, Alex Segbefia, head of the NDC Running Mates campaign, a former health minister too, joins us in the studio. Gloria Ofori-Boadu is a legal, yes, is a legal and governance spokesperson for the MPP Manifesto. Alex, thanks for joining us. Gloria, too, also. I want to start with the biggest ticket all the time when you're dealing with governance, the corruption issue. The corruption issue. I see the NDC, as we've just been illustrating in there. When you do a cursory check of their manifesto, I see 36 mentions of the word corruption. MPP has only 3 in there. And you say you're going to be doing, you have a name for it, Alex. But people say they look back on your track record before 2016, and you're looking at all the things you say in your manifesto. And say, but where's the track record to prove that you can actually do all the things you say you do on corruption if you get another chance under John Dramani Mahama?
First and foremost, good evening to all your viewers and listeners, and to my colleague Gloria, and to your good self.
Good evening.
I think that there are 2 comparisons you're drawing at the moment. One, you're drawing the comparison as what we did when we were in office, and then you draw a comparison as to what we have seen, or what the MPP has done in governance in the last 8 years. I humbly put forward that our track record on issues of corruption are a lot better than the MPP.
In more specific areas?
Well, there's a corruption index which is international. It's not anything that we do or any of the political parties are involved in. And that index is clearly showing that, or has shown that the performance of the MPP, our worst performance is their best performance. And that's an international target, nothing to do with what we say or what we do. But there are a number of things that have gone on with regard to corruption that create a problem. So,
and just to put it in context, because this is Manifesto Tracker, on the issue of the Corruption Perception Index, which is universally the accepted way of measuring if you're doing well, John Mahama's worst, and this is just factual, of 43 is Akufo-Addo's best.
Yes.
It's just factual. And he rose all the way to 43 on that particular mark. And hold your horses there, because the facts are there. Let me just put it to Gloria on that. But how do you respond to that? Because track record is important in assessing your promise going into the next administration.
I just want to correct something that has gone totally and absolutely wrong. I'm telling you that for the first time in the history of this country, the incoming government of Dr. Mahmoud Bawumia under the NPP is going to enact a Corrupt Practices Act. And when we talk of a Corrupt Practices Act...
Similar to what we have in the US.
It's this is unprecedented. It's to consolidate all anti-corruption and corruption-related legislation and offences that are currently scattered across several pieces of legislation. Because I heard you talking about the fact that the Code of Public Officers Conduct Bill has been in Parliament for 10 years. No, the incoming government of Dr. Mahmoud Bawumia is going to enact a Corrupt Practices Act that will merge all these pieces of legislation. It's never happened before, and definitely when we vote his government into power, it's going to happen. But, and that has been captured so vividly. I'm surprised that you haven't noticed it. It's been captured so vividly in our manifesto under 8.33.
Yes.
So I don't know why you kept going on and on about the fact that the MPP is silent on corruption. No, we are not. We are going to have an omnibus, an all-inclusive, consolidated anti-corruption and corruption-related legislation.
Well, I actually said that the corruption, the word, is mentioned 3 times in your manifesto. The NDC said 36. That's what I said. I didn't say. I didn't say.
That is immaterial.
That
maybe the NDC had 36 because they are all scattered, you know. But we are not. We are merging,
I'll come,
subsuming. Please.
I'll come to this
so
point.
So just correct it.
I
just wanted to correct it.
So what are we correcting?
The fact that we have corruption as a major piece, an item in
but that's
the
the point
NPP,
I made. But nobody has said I don't have corruption. I said
but
corruption.
We have, and the way it's captured, we are not sticking to all these little pieces of legislation because already since 2017, the Nana Akufo-Addo-led administration has implemented all these policies, enacted the Right to Information Act, enacted the Witness Protection Act, criminal offences, anti-money laundering, on and on, Office of Special Prosecutor. So now we want to develop and build on it. So we don't need 36 scattered mention of corruption. We just need a consolidated corruption.
The question I was asking you before I go to the specifics.
So just vote for us.
The question I was asking before I go to the specifics is about track record. And I'm saying that if you look at John Mahama's worst in the Corruption Perception Index is your best. That goes to
why?
speak to...
Can you explain why?
Well, it's just the evidence of the Corruption Perception Index and what it says. It's a very objective way of assessing the performance.
This?
So over the period from 2012 to 2016, that was a John Mahama period. And we have 2017 to 2023, that's the NPP's period.
And that's why we want to improve on it.
If you look at the rankings over the period, JM's worst of 43 is your best of 43.
Well, I wouldn't go into that.
He had done a bit more work than you.
No, I disagree. I wouldn't go into that. We are looking at Manifesto tracker, okay? So let's look at the Manifesto. Here we have come with all this track record of 2019, Act 989, enacting the Right to Information, the Witness Protection Act 2018, enacting the Criminal Offences Amendment Act 2020, the Anti-Money Laundering Act 2020, rolling out the Ghana.gov platform,
and analysis
and all that. Okay,
so
now we are building.
Well,
the outcome.
The measurement says that your ranking still on the Corruption Perception Index
No, I think that
is not as good in spite of all the things you claim you've done.
If we are looking at the Manifesto tracker, then you know that this is I'll still use the word unprecedented. That innovation of enacting a Corrupt Practices Act in Africa. I don't know how many countries have merged their so many pieces of legislation on corruption into one legislation. This is an innovation, and the incoming government of Dr. Mahmoud Bawumia is going to ensure that this legislation comes into the continent through his government in Ghana. And I guess it might even be better than the US system.
Alex?
I want to make a very important point. It's not the laws you pass, it's how you implement them. Ghana has, in fact, too many laws. We have laws for almost everything. Yes, you can tinker with a few, amend a few, but the bottom line is, if you don't implement what you have, then there's no point. I give you a classic example of when we were all debating the vigilante bill, and a new law was passed with regard to vigilantes, etc., and what political parties had to sign up to it, etc. That was a piece of bad governance on my part, because when the bill was finally put in place, or the document, I shouldn't say a bill, a document was created with the Peace Council, everybody was asked to sign the document, and the one person, that group that didn't sign the document was the government. And that was unfortunate. In any event, everything that was in that bill existed in existing laws already, technically. So you could still have dealt with people who misbehaved or dealt with things differently during an election or with regard to vigilantes, but it was never put forward. You had incidents of crime in the Ayawaso West Wagon, in the issue with regard to the election process itself, where 8 NDC people passed on. And there was no, and still is, nobody convicted of these issues or even brought to book.
We're talking about governance. How is that related to
Because corruption comes in different facets. Corruption doesn't just stop with the act of corruption. If things are overlooked within the criminal sphere, it can lead to corruption. And corruption also goes to the heart of governance. So corrupt practices by state institutions, corrupt practices by people in positions who should know better, lead us to the point where you have bad governance. All I'm saying is, look, NDC was there for 8 years. That's the beauty of where we are today. You do your comparison, what did we do in 8 years? Somebody just for thinking that I'm looking to have maybe $1 million in my account was removed from office. Others were prosecuted. What is the track record of the MPP with regard to issues that have been raised under their governance? And some are so blatant that you begin to wonder, and people are still at post. The issue of the purchase of drugs, namely COVID vaccines, by the health minister then, which didn't have parliamentary approval, didn't have cabinet approval, didn't have attorney general's advice, and went ahead, is a clear case of corruption.
Yeah, but you've said in your manifesto that you will be investigating some of these and prosecuting people. And as CDD were doing analysis, one of the key things that you said you would do, and you're very vague on that, which CDD makes a point, is asset declaration regime. You commit to say you review and enforce the asset declaration regime because it's part of the corruption, fundamentally.
Yes.
A lot of the cases you cited, you believe, and civil society believe, people take their money and then they invest in acquiring wealth. Yes. If the asset has been declared, that's a deterrence enough. Yes. You say you review and enforce the asset declaration regime in Chapter 24 of the Constitution.
Yes.
Republic, and the Public Officers Holders Act 2 to promote transparency and check corruption. Which specific aspects of the asset declaration regime are you seeking to review?
Currently, with the asset declaration, when you declare your assets, nobody sees it.
So you're saying that under an NDC government?
Yes, we would just open the space.
You will open it up.
Exactly.
When you say nobody sees, who will see it now under your regime?
I cannot go into the detail, but I'm clear in my mind that whether or not it's going to be exposed to the whole public or to a designated group, it will be seen.
I mean, but with 44 days to an election,
yes,
you shouldn't know specifics by now.
No, I'm saying that this is something that we have a clear area in which we are going to go in. By the time you get into office and you are ready to declare and you have done your asset, because we still do it. It's just that it's not scrutinized by anybody. And nobody even gets to see it when you are leaving. You do another one when you are leaving office. And the two documents just stay in an envelope, and that's the end of it. So what we are saying is that it will be available. So for example, Parliament can call for it. We want to see your asset declaration. Or somebody will be allowed, some group will be allowed to call for the assets declaration. Your unfortunate person like Domelovo could have asked, if he was still in post, that look, let's see your asset declaration. He's the Auditor General. Let's see what can happen. So that is how we envisage that area. And then it will more or less then make it more transparent. Very interesting that John Mahama has also said that, look, if you're in my government, you have no business in any mining. Because Galamsey is a big issue. You've been doing all kinds of things. So as a deterrent or as an important part, for you to deal with Galamsey, one of the issues you have to deal with is to remove government involvement in it. One of the biggest problems with it is that there's government, what's it called? Apparatchiks or people in it involved in Galamsey. So if you do not take them out, it becomes very difficult to then deal with the root cause, because as of the boys who are out there doing Galamsey and the corruption and all that is going on, they are not the root cause. The root cause are the businessmen and politicians who are behind it. And John Mahama has said. So I'm saying that there's many things he has said about the corruption, or the NDC has said about corruption, and this is one of them.
Yeah,
our position is very clear on many things.
Yeah, and on this side, I want to bring in Gloria. So on the asset declaration, what's the MPP's position on that? I mean, civil society agree that for a manifesto to be responsive. I didn't see that clearly in your manifesto. Do you see that as an important
I just
part?
want to correct something. We can never have too many laws in a developing society. In fact, the fact that we have laws, and these laws are being implemented, observed, especially our constitution and our constitutional supremacy, I'm sure has augured well for Ghana as an oasis of peace and development in the West African sub-region. So please, we can never have too many laws. We can't. It's important that we have the laws to govern.
What is more important, the laws or the implementation and enforcement?
Both. If you don't have the laws as a basis, how can you plan, implement, and enforce?
But on corruption,
you implement and enforce in
the
vacuum.
Laws on corruption.
And that's why the incoming government of Dr. Mahmoud Bawumia is going to enact the Corrupt Practices Act. Please take note. The new Patriotic Party has a new unprecedented proposal in our manifesto for corrupt practices, and it's been globally observed. Having a law which is, consolidated is easier to implement, monitor, and enforce than when it's in 36
My question is about the asset declaration.
The NDC. Now, let me go to the asset declaration. When it comes to governance, we are looking at openness, we are looking at transparency, we are looking at accountability. In this regard, the manifesto has built on Article 286 of our Constitution, which looks at assets declaration by certain categories of public office holders. In this manifesto, we intend, the incoming government of Dr. Mahmoud Bawumia intends to expand the assets declaration by public office holders to include, among others, senior staff and heads of regulatory and public institutions which are not previously covered in the Constitution, and then, in addition, require asset declarations to be made or updated every 2 years instead of every 4 years, and then place limits on foreign official travel by ministers, CEOs, and senior civil servants, as well as annually,
on the asset declaration,
as well as annually publish.
You talk
make
about
it open and transparent. Publish official travels undertaken.
You talk about
with the taxpayers' money. Yes.
Expand the asset declaration. You mentioned the additional officers you want to bring in.
Yes.
And make it every 2 years instead of 4 years. But
Yes.
what problem will that solve, really? That second part
I
make it every 2 years or instead of 4 years.
Well, I just indicated that.
What problem will that? Are you trying to solve with that?
We are talking of governance, okay? We are looking at openness, transparency, accountability. So we want, as taxpayers, we need to know what is going on with our public office holders.
Yeah, so you just make the point that you need to know.
Yes, we need to know.
The problem with the current legislation is that we don't know.
Exactly.
Although you declare.
Well, this is the Constitution. It's not any party legislation. Article 286 is the Constitution.
So the CDD,
now we want to develop...
The CDD benchmark says that the problem you want to solve is making it open.
Yes,
so that the person knows that if you declare, it will be seen.
Yes, it has to be.
But currently, if you declare, it is sealed.
Yes. Well, now it has to be seen. And that's why
that's
why we are one step ahead of the end.
But your proposal doesn't address that.
Which has been copying and pasting our manifesto. They always wait for us to launch it before they do this.
We've told
anyway.
But your proposal doesn't address that.
No, it does.
That it will be seen.
Yes.
You say you will make it. You will increase the frequency.
Please, as well as annually publish.
Yes.
So what does that mean?
So annually
if you publish, what is the definition
currently,
of publish?
You declare. When you say publish, you tell me what's the MPP's definition?
What is the
manifesto? That's a whole point of manifesto track.
So we are publishing what is happening. It means we are making it visible. We are making it known, as you know.
So when you say publish, are you going to put it on a website? When Gloria, as a minister,
will just vote for the MPP administration under the incoming presidency of Dr. Mahmoud Bawumia, and you will help us. You are also a media, operative. So you help us with the publication for the purposes of good governance involving accountability, transparency, and openness. And just know that it's being done. Not only that, look at the digitalization of the economy when it comes to GRA, when it comes to DVLA. All of them are aspects of making sure that money does not change hands, but it goes directly into the government's consolidated fund. Please, if we are to talk of what the administration is doing now under Nana Akufo-Addo with the support of the incoming president, Dr. Mahmoud Bawumia, in terms of accountability, transparency, openness, we can go on and on. I like the way that you are tracking. We can have a whole list, okay,
of things that you've done.
That we've done.
On another thing, Alex.
Ask the NDC.
Yes.
I want to switch to an area that both parties address when it comes to the governance, the constitutional review. And
both parties don't address it.
Well, I'll come to that. I'll come to the specifics. As I illustrated, the MPP says undertake constitutional reviews and amendments. So they will do something about it. You say you establish a constitutional review implementation committee.
Let me be clear. You made some statements which are don't give the full picture.
Okay, which is?
The first thing is that it was the NDC, and I agreed with you on that, fantastic, that actually brought about constitutional review.
Yes, and yet, when you had the opportunity to govern, you failed to implement.
No, we didn't fail to implement. When John Mahama came, they set up a constitutional implementation committee. Just when it was supposed to take off, the matter of whether we had the right to create a constitutional review committee provision was sent to the Supreme Court. So everything had to halt. It was in the Supreme Court for well over a year and a bit. So at the time when the ruling came that what we had done was legitimate, we were 11 months to the next election.
11 long months.
Well, you will say so.
But it is 11 long months.
No,
Alex.
Because you yourself have just said here that a lot of those provisions require referendums. It's not something, and you see the problem.
But there were lots of low-hanging fruits in there that you could have plucked.
No, that is not the case. Because you see, part of the problem they had when we got into this argument about whether you should have partisan MCs and MCDCs, that wasn't the only argument. The whole argument about that issue was you shouldn't create a situation where the power still remains with the presidency. So if you don't do an amendment which stops him from still appointing everybody else in the MDCs or the metropolitan or the district offices, what will happen is that they will, whoever is voted or not voted will always be outvoted in a district by the the appointees of government.
In 11 months from actually doing something about
because
the
you have to put
process.
them. You don't do one. When you touch one, it affects another. This is what the Constitutional Implementation Committee was doing. You touch A, you must look at M and you must look at K. Because A affects K and M. If you don't put the three together and go for a referendum, you will not get, in fact, you create a problem within the Constitution. So that was why it was not done at the time, because you couldn't do them peacefully.
So my question is,
yes,
in 11 months,
what
did you do?
No, we said, when the matter came out of court, it was clear that you need almost a 2-year period to go through the process. And at an election year...
We're doing a wholesale review?
Let me ask you a simple question. Why is it that they say that any major reforms before an election should be done not in the year of the election, in the electoral process? You should do it before that. Because everybody knows the temperature and the pressure in an election year. You don't do constitutional review changes in an election year. For me, it's common sense. It's not rocket science. You do it in the first 3 years of government. That's when you do constitutional review. If it's at the tail end, when you are finished, you've already started and finishing, and its process is on, yes. You don't start constitutional review changes in an election year. Definitely not. And there are major changes. You have to look at the report of the Constitutional Review, then you see that it wasn't one of these simple things you do. So as a Constitutional Review, the only party that is serious about Constitutional Review and wants it done properly so that we don't have conflict within certain sections of the Constitution is the NDC.
Gloria, you agree with this?
No, totally disagree. Because I remember that before the government white paper on the CRC reports came out, there were all these stakeholder consultations. And I remember I attended one at the International Conference Center, right? And I remember so vividly that when it came to election of DCs, there were a lot of us who were for election of DCs. But at the end of the day, when the report came out, the rapporteur said that, oh, even though a lot of us were for election of DCs, it was slightly tilted to maintaining the status quo. And some of us were very upset that that was not what prevailed in the room because we were there. And I remember one guy following me to convince me, and I'm like, please, I'm not even a DC. We only came here as stakeholders. So we just want to be reported. Anyway, I don't know what happened of that what happened with that government white paper. But I can assure you that as of 2 weeks ago, the, what do you call it, the parliamentary leadership, the former leader, Honorable Osechi Mensah, and then the Constitution Review Committee, which has been formed.
Under his ministry, the Ministry of Parliamentary
Yes, under the government of Nana Akufo-Addo, had a meeting at Platinum Bay, and we went through some proposals. So it's ongoing. The NPP government is committed to the Constitution and looking at some amendments that will work for our development.
Let's be specific.
And it's captured in this manifesto.
It has, because you say that where required, undertake constitutional reviews and amendment. Which specific reviews do you want to undertake? Oh,
have you seen the summary and the outcome of that meeting? I'll get you a copy.
Yeah.
For example, when it comes to gender, there's this aspect that they wanted to take out women and maternity leave. And so under the Constitution, I think the article on women, maternity leave, promotion, access to promotion, equal opportunities for promotion and training, and childcare centers. There's this aspect that we should look, capture it as gender. But then the outcome of that proposal was that these are, when it comes to maternity and childbirth, these are specifically related to women. And we cannot, and it's also specifically related to planning and development. Because trust me, in 50 years, you and I will not be here to be hosting this program, okay, or participating, to be maybe the unborn children.
So that's one. So, which other area do you want to review?
So based on planning, so we indicated that no, the aspect of women should still be captured. There are other proposals, okay? I'll make
like
sure
electing
that
MMDCEs, which is one, but you still want to do it on a partisan basis.
When I look at this manifesto, what do we say?
You say you want to have us elect MMDCEs. NDC is very specific that they want to do it on a non-partisan basis, which is really at the heart of the controversy.
Can I just...
Yes.
So the NPP is committed to the Constitution and making sure that specific amendments to our Constitution for the purposes of national development takes effect. And there are ongoing meetings, and there's a committee which has been established to do that. So it's not like it's promising, it's already effecting it. Yes, and I was part of the meeting.
Yeah, I mean, so, Alex, that's a track record there. They already have, under the leadership of K. Mensah Bonsu.
It's a non-track record.
Oh.
What's a track record? But they actually have a committee working on this.
You see.
With eminent people like...
you are talking as if you were asking me a question about something that happened, and you were chastising me or making a point about 11 months. What about 8 years? What about 8 years? They've had 8 years. They haven't done one constitutional change. The issue of even MMDC is, what was the argument? Should we elect them on a partisan basis or not? As you say. I said there was a little bit more to it, but these are the issues. So go back and bring it in a different format. Or let's just meet a middle road. No. It has never been. No discussion on it after it went. That is the end of it. 8 years. And that was brought, I think, in the second year or so.
Yeah.
When they came, is left. This issue about women, so why hasn't it been there? They've had 8 years to do it. Every single thing we are talking about here, they are in government. We are telling you what we will do when we come based on what we did 8 years before their 8 years. So our track record is there, and they are in. I mean, when you talk about the current flag bearer, he's not somebody who has just come and is a newcomer on the scene. He's our vice president. I mean, he's the number 2 in the country. What has happened all this time in the governance circle? It's now in the manifesto. So what has been happening on the governance front for the last 8 years? So I'm clear. The failure or inaction on their part to do certain things, one on the corruption front, two on the governance front in terms of the manifesto, the constitution. The constitution is an area that it is clear, and everybody knows it. Nana Addo is not in favor of wholesale change. He thinks that we'll pick this one, we'll pick this. That is his view, and he has made it clear.
And let me put this to you.
I disagree with
why is it that all of a sudden constitutional review is they are interested in
let me hear your disagreement, Gloria. Let me hear your disagreement.
You see, I just see this as shifting the goalpost and yet blaming the MPP for not scoring the goal. As early as 2017, the MPP administration started a process to amend Articles 55, Clause 3, Articles 243 and 244 of the 1992 Constitution to allow political parties to sponsor candidates to district assemblies or lower local government units elections, and to enable citizens to be part and also to vote directly. And then what happened? The process became stalled in December 2019 due to challenges in finalizing consensus on the issue.
No, let me put it to you. When we did the analysis,
what were the
CDD says, the Afrobarometer says, majority of Ghanaians want this to happen, one, but they want it to happen on a non-partisan basis.
Exactly.
But you decide
to go partisan,
that you want it on a partisan basis. And the CDD says if you're really measuring public sentiment, you're on the wrong side of that.
What happened in 2019?
Because NDC said they will not support you unless it is on a non-partisan basis.
So why does NDC now turn around to say that we have failed? Let's be realistic. When you compare the elections and the national elections, the parliamentary elections, you always find that there's participation, there's involvement. It's all very exciting. When it comes to the district assembly elections, apart from challenges with budgetary, allocations, it's always postponed. People do not know who they are voting for. There's lack of interest. And so some research has indicated that why don't we have it like the parliamentary and national elections, which gives opportunity for people to stand with political parties or as independent. And this has been going on. And we realize that if we want to give effect to what people want, then it's exciting if you give people the opportunity to either choose to vote on political party
there's consensus on that.
Or
there's consensus on that.
I was an elected assembly woman, and I know the difference between what happens when it comes to parliamentary or presidential. Our elections were postponed about 3 times. We hyped it all we can, but by the 3rd time, there were few people available to vote.
But there was consensus on whether or not citizens should elect.
Citizens electing.
Yes, but the problem is, do you do it on a partisan basis or non-partisan basis?
Both. In fact, they are even...
You can't do both.
No. With democracy, there's always opportunity
the people through the Afrobarometer polls have spoken clearly. They don't want it.
I don't know about Afrobarometer, but I know there are research findings to show that the reason why there's low turnout when it comes to district assembly elections is because people are just not interested. Those who want political party participation in reality, not underground, not in shroud and all that.
A quick point.
No, just a moment.
Yes.
Please, in all humility. Yes. Those who want political participation are not excited about it. And very few people want to vote for independent district assembly persons. Okay. So I think that is an area we have to look at. In fact, in Nigeria, as of now, they ensure that district assembly elections parliamentary, and then the presidency occur on the same day with, similar ballot papers. And there are all these talks that maybe we should look at that to whip enthusiasm into participation in local
I have 5 minutes wrap up, and I want to do 2 quick things before I wrap up. And I want to take both of you to 2 additional areas quickly. I mean, and to you first, Alex, and still on the fight against corruption. If you really want to fight corruption, you have to put your money where your mouth is. And so one of the things we did was to track the spending that both your government, when you had power, and the current government, what they've done in terms of where they're investing monies into the anti-corruption agencies, if you like, basically, comparing who is spending more to resource. And we isolated 3 institutions. SHRAJ, NDC met, MPP met 46 million, and by the time they were leaving, as of this year, look at the budget, they raised it to 88 million. That's a jump there. If you look at the NDC...
86 million what?
86 million cedis.
Investments?
Yes, into SHRAJ. There's this very consistent rise there.
Thank you.
And the NDC, you met in 2009, 4.2 million. By the time JM was leaving, he had increased it to 30.5 million. Okay. That's for SHRAJ. And then you look at the AG's office, right? And of course, the AG's office, I'm talking about the Auditor General's office. The Auditor General's office is very fundamental when it comes to this. The NPP had increased it, if you look at the numbers here, quite a bit over the period to they made 118 million. By the time they were leaving office, this had gone up to almost $1 billion, actually, over the period.
Yeah.
NDC had increased it actually by 398% from 15 to 74.7 million. So all of them see a jump. The question is, how significant is the jump? The audit service is another one, and that's striking, and I'll stop there and ask the question. Audit service, MPP met 186.5 million. By the time they were leaving, they had increased spending and funding to 633. NDC met 24 million cedis, and you've increased it to 140 million cedis. I mean, if you put the 3 institutions together, you see that the MPP has done more than you in terms of the incremental resource allocation to these 3 agencies, putting their mouths where they are, putting their monies where their mouth is. That shows commitment, does it not? And plus, they've even created a whole different institution in the Office of Special Prosecutor.
Okay.
We've also started...
The proof of the pudding is in the eating.
It's in the money, isn't it?
No.
It's in where they are putting the money.
It is not... Look, if you are throwing money at a situation and you're not able to regulate it, and the outcome which you are trying to achieve is not achieved, why are you giving yourself credit?
How are you measuring this outcome?
We go back to our corruption index.
The corruption perception index.
Yes, exactly. Yeah, you see, you cannot have it both ways. You're putting all this money. Why is everybody talking about corruption in Ghana? Why is corruption a major issue? Why is the issue of...
but corruption was an issue under the NDC too.
I'm not saying it was. It wasn't. It's a question of degree. It's a question of degree. How much money has been through our system in the last 8 years? You can clap for the MPP. We've had a whole amount of money, huge, either through loans, through revenue, through oil fields none of us had, all that revenue. And now you must juxtapose it against what has been achieved with that money. And the answer is simply 0. You are a bankrupt nation. Whether we like it or not, we declared we are bankrupt. So if you start looking at the amount of money that we've had and say, oh, look, by the way, we've had this amount of money, so we have done well, and you are bankrupt. What have you used the money?
Not true.
What? I didn't say we are bankrupt. You are the ones who said that. We cannot pay our debts. That is why the IMF had to step in. The IMF that you were never going to go to, you had to go back to them. And so for me, you looking at the money, it's a red herring completely.
No, but it's important, is it not?
Well, it has its importance. But you must also,
the agencies.
So, okay, you are empowering the agencies. What has been achieved? Is our corruption any better?
You know, I like this perspective.
Yes,
corruption perception is not the reality. We are talking of corruption perception index. That's why the incoming government of Dr. Mahmoud Bawumia has come up with this proposal to enact a Corrupt Practices Act. Not only that, improve transparency, accountability, and good governance in procurement and other sectors.
How?
By the National Electronic Procurement Platform, GANEPS. We have GANEPS. We have the proposed establishment of an e-marketplace for public procurement.
So more digitalization.
Yes, more of digitalization. Already digitalization is going on, which is the first time in the history of Ghana. It's unprecedented, and it's even been hailed by some, global Western governments. So this is something that is being done. Look at our law courts. The AG now has a whole complex. Since the history of, of the development of our, from Gold Coast to Ghana, for the first time, we are not using a colonial office, but we have this whole complex. And all these courts that have been built in different, regions and districts, more training of judges. The legal aid system is already in force and is going to be even, what do you call it? Boldly adhered to. So I will say that that is the situation.
So he's talking about what they've
I've just remembered something.
Very briefly.
He's talking of the resetting agenda of the NDC. When you look at the online version, the table of contents, when it comes to, I was researching good governance under Chapter 6 of resetting, whatever, under NDC. The table of contents says I can find their good governance under pages 135 to 155. And yet, when you go online, you search through it, you find good governance under pages 166 to 190. So I'll suggest that you reset your online manifesto. This is a friendly advice. As a
Maybe your digitalization is not working properly.
Please do that. So reset it so that it will reflect what is in the hard copies. 135.
How is this an issue at all?
So if you are trying to reset Ghana, then little details are important. The whole, NDC, what do you call manifesto, has a different table of content page for good governance. Well, and then it's
Gloria now.
So please reset your manifesto.
I'm grateful that you joined me.
And then you can reset. So think of other resets. But you are not ready now.
If governance is the reason for choosing either of one of these two parties, we've helped you make a decision. Go to their booth and decide. Enjoy the rest of your evening.